Despite the technical issues and weak story, the original Dead Island was a success. Deep Silver has returned with the follow-up Dead Island Riptide, but will gamers be able to overlook the same issues again? Dead Island Riptide takes place right after the end of Dead Island. If you haven't played the first one, that's alright, as the events that occurred during it are summarized in the first cutscene. In Riptide, you start out on a military ship that gets caught in a rough storm. When the storm passes, you awake to find yourself on Palanai, an island in the Benai archipelago. It doesn't take long to realize that the infected plague this island as well. The story paints a grim tale for the original survivors from the first game. Even from the start, the band of survivors face a lot of challenges. If you played the first one, you know that the story's potential wasn't nearly as high as it could have been. It appears that this is also the case with Dead Island Riptide. I'm not saying that the story is a major turnoff, but those looking for a major improvement will be disappointed. You can play as the same cast of characters from the original Dead Island, with the addition of newcomer John Morgan. Each character is an expert in their own weapon department, though they can use any weapon they come across. When starting the game for the first time, you'll have the option to import your character data from the first game. This means you can start with your level 60 character. Missions seem to consist a good deal of fetch quests, though there are other types, such as defense missions, in which you need to hold down the area you're in from waves of infected. There are also side missions, which upgrade the weapon level of other survivors in the area. I didn't mind the fetch quests as much, and overall enjoyed the missions, but I can understand if some gamers might find this annoying. Overall, I would say the combat is very similar to Dead Island, which was one of the bright spots of the original. Once again, weapons can be found on corpses and littered across the environment for those who might not have enough funds to purchase items from survivors. Each weapon you find in the game can be repaired, upgraded, or modded. There's a good variety of enemies that you'll come across, not just the infected who appeared in the first Dead Island. Other new variants, such as drowners, grenadiers, and wrestlers, also appear. Each of these have a unique attack style. An example is how the drowners appear to be lifeless, floating bodies in the water until you get near them either by foot or boat. While the enemies level with your character, they still are likely to overpower you individually or in a group. A vast majority of my deaths were due to not taking into account how many infected were close when I would attack one. Co-op gameplay is back, and again is done online, and you can play with up to 3 people. However, you cannot play co-op locally. This can be a pain if you have friends over and want to take down hordes of infected together. Joining a game can be as simple as pressing a button when the title lets you know a player is nearby. The enemies you fight will be on your level, whereas the ones your teammates will fight will be scaled to theirs, which is nice if your friend is a higher level than you, or you're playing with someone who played the first game and you didn't. While my time with the co-op gameplay was brief, I preferred playing the game in co-op, but it was just as enjoyable playing through the game solo. While the graphics are not super realistic, I was impressed by how decent they looked. The island is bright and vibrant when the weather is nice. With the dynamic weather system, you can go from having a clear view of your surroundings to limited range during a heavy downpour. Because the game is so gory, I found that the not-so-realistic graphics made it easier to play through the game. Dead Island Riptide is very generous with the amount of blood that gushes out from whatever extremity you sever on an infected's body. Much like the first title, Riptide has its fair share of bugs and issues. I did have some frame rate problems at random times during the game. This can happen at some really bad times and allow the infected to get a few cheap hits in. The lag, luckily, never lasted too long, although it was a reason for a few of my deaths. Also, there are some bugs with the infected popping in and out of the environment, causing them to do things like alternate between being on the ground and the roof of nearby buildings. Voice acting for the main characters were decent enough, but the minor characters repeated the same lines over and over, which could get annoying. Dead Island Riptide is not a terrible game, but it is not a great game, and it isn't for everyone. If you're a fan of the first one and want something that isn't quite a sequel, then you'll likely enjoy Dead Island Riptide. Those hoping to see major improvements with this title may want to put off making a purchase. The game is not without its issues, which is a little disappointing, especially since the first game suffered from so many of the same bugs. I enjoyed Riptide more than I thought I would, and ultimately the bugs and lackluster story are the only things holding this game back. That's why I gave this game a 7 out of 10. For more information, check out our full written review at vividgamer.com.